Funding for current conversations is provided by the University of Oklahoma President's Office, the OU Office of Student Affairs, OU Outreach, and World Literature Today. Welcome to Current Conversations. I'm R.C. Davis-Indiano. Today we're going to be speaking with two experts on the experience of being a minority male in America. We'll be talking with Dr. Amer Ahmed, Director of Faculty Development at the University of Massachusetts, and an expert on Islamophobia and other forms of racism. We'll also speak with Dr. Cristobal Salinas, Assistant Director of Florida Atlantic University, and an expert on Latino teachers in higher education. Join us for this fascinating conversation.
Yeah, so I serve as Director of Intercultural Teaching and Faculty Development, but really I'm an internal diversity consultant for academic affairs. I work with the schools and colleges within the university to try to help them develop strategies to creating inclusive environments. I might be thinking about recruitment of students and faculty, and also, again, thinking about how do you create an inclusive environment where people can feel valued and respected in the classroom, in the work environments, and so forth.
I want to ask you about Islamophobia, which I don't think gets nearly enough discussion in America. Could I take you back? Could you give us an overview, at least from your perspective, of the issue of Islamophobia in America before 9/11?
Yeah, I mean, Islamophobia is a lot older than people realize. It really goes back to the Crusades. It goes back to the Reconquista, the reconquering of Spain, and the impact that had on the rationale around colonialism and the sense of superiority of European and white colonizers in various parts of the world, including the Islamic world. But then as we move into kind of modern times, the late 20th century, early 21st century American society, we have immigration of people from all different parts of the world, many of whom are Muslim or many of whom are perceived as Muslim, and a sense of exotification, a sense of resistance, a rejection of the foreign other. And that was also happening alongside increases in Islam amongst African Americans. Islam really being something associating with Africa for many African Americans, reclaiming identity prior to slavery, and resisting oppression and so forth. And so we have a very diverse society, but overwhelmingly we're perceived as people of color and non-white. And that might not always be true, but that's how we're perceived. And so we experience a racialized dynamic in this country. And then with 9/11, all of that has been exacerbated.
But before we talk about post 9/11, all of what you're talking about, doesn't it go under that very large umbrella of Orientalism? And I just mention that because it's a huge umbrella, and there's reinforcement in the West from a lot of different directions to see Middle Eastern people as kind of bloodthirsty and outside of cultural renegades in some way, overly passionate.
Absolutely. In my talks, I always say everybody must read Orientalism by Edward Said to learn and understand that distorted lens that Europe has had towards Eastern cultures, particularly Arab cultures. But, it's also the conflating. And my family's from India, originally. And, we all kind of get grouped together. And, Islamophobia tremendously affects the Sikh community, which is a different religious group that originates from India. And the men wear turbans because they don't cut their hair. And ironically, most Muslims don't wear turbans, but they get perceived to be Muslim. And as a community, they're subjected as a proportion to more hate crimes than any community in this country.
It almost seems like a matter of sort of dark humor that all these people are being grouped into one stereotype, and the fit is not good at all. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, you might remember a couple years back, the Miss America winner was the first South Asian American that ever won. She was actually one of my former students from University of Michigan, and she was bombarded with all these tweets saying that the Arab won and the terrorists have won and a Muslim won, and she's actually a Hindu American, but because she's brown, she's just grouped in with this, this foreign other Muslim threat, perceived Muslim threat that's taking over America, supposedly imposing Sharia law and so forth. And so, yeah, there's a belligerence to it.
It's possible that the presidential election coming up in November will be a fork in the road, right? And we go one way, then we'll start maybe addressing this problem. If we go another, we may be just kind of throwing fuel on the flames.
Absolutely. I mean, during this presidential election, we've had declarations of banning Muslims from entering the country. But okay, so people might want to dismiss. They might say that's Donald Trump or whatever. There was a widespread acceptance of the idea of not accepting Muslim refugees. Jeb Bush was supportive of that. Lots of the presidential candidates were supportive of that. To having a religious test on the most vulnerable people on the planet and the most screened people on the planet. It's just, what is it saying about us as a country that we can't even accept refugees?
It says we don't value our own Constitution, for one thing, because it would have been unconstitutional to do that.
Exactly.
I don't want to leave what you said before as just a generality about, acts of aggression and discrimination. Mm-hmm. Could you be as specific as you're comfortable being? Maybe some forms that microaggressions take, but also sort of other kinds of acts that people suffer from?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the random security check, which is not that random. I've experienced that.
Like in airports, or
yeah. Every man in my family has been on a flight watch list at some point. My brother's sons, from the time they were 6 years old, they were on flight watch lists. So he used to show up at the airport, and they couldn't fly. They would take the IDs in the back, and if you ask questions, they yell at you. And so he used to have to go to the airport a day in advance to get his sons cleared. Dude, you're talking about children, But for me, my worst experiences have been when coming back into the country from somewhere else. I lived in Michigan. You want to go to Toronto or to Windsor. And then you think twice, like, do I really want to deal with that? And then, because there was definitely a period of time where every single time I was coming back from the country, I was getting stopped. They're going through all my stuff. They take my passport. And then still to this day, like every 1 or 2 times, it pretty much happens.
What about microaggressions in the workplace and social life? Maybe not just even your own, but ones you've observed or you know about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of pathologizing of Muslims, that there's something inherently violent or suspicious. We're seeing it in the classroom and in higher education a lot. We're seeing it show up in terms of what faculty are saying, in curriculums, what students are saying in an unchecked way about Muslims, really blanket statements and non-factual statements. And it's being fed by a media that is really creating a deep distortion. If we based Christianity and the only representation was of the Ku Klux Klan, over and over again, we would think that that's a really odd representation of Christianity relative to what we know Christianity to be, for better or for worse of the complex world of Christianity.
It's a really good comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, is it really fair for me or anybody else who's Muslim to be, measured by what ISIS does? And and of course we know ISIS was born out of the failure of the Iraq War, and so, I mean, it is really sad, the narrowing, and I've talked also about how Islamophobia is not a partisan issue, and I'm really concerned about people like Bill Maher, who are these like flaming liberals, and he has a show that has about 4 million viewers every week, and he bashes Muslims every single week, and he's teaching liberals that we should make an exception when it comes to Muslims and Islam. And people say, oh well, he hates all religion, but he specifically, him and people like Sam Harris and others, they very much pathologize Islam, that there's something inherent in Islam.
I haven't seen Bill Maher do that, and I'm really disappointed to hear that.
Yeah.
That sounds really ugly.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what, like I said, that's part of the scary nature of it, is that we don't even know where to turn, because it's coming at us from multiple directions.
I've heard some researchers talk about the fact that when people know about their own past, the warts and the beauty and the horse thieves, as well as the mayors of towns and so on, they're more inherently sympathetic with other people's situations.
Yeah.
The less they know about their own past, the more they see themselves as kind of monolithic and have unreal expectations of others.
Yeah, and that's a second main core competency I work on with people. So after self-awareness is empathy. So as you develop self-awareness, it becomes easier to actually shift perspectives and validate the experience of someone else as true for them, irrespective of what I think, right? And so that empathy is critical, because if I don't really value and understand who you are and what your experience is, it's going to be very difficult for me to truly be able to respect you and treat you the way that you deserve to be treated in any environment, hypothetically in an organizational environment.
You're so helpful in all this. I don't want to push you beyond what you want to talk about right now, but I truly don't understand the reaction to gay people very often.
Yeah.
Is there a kind of fear that it's a contagion, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, why the defensiveness? I've never understood that.
I mean, I think it's religiously rooted. I mean, I think that there's people who have interpreted, and that's been institutionalized in structures. I mean, the church, the mosques are not structured the way churches are, but there are plenty of people in Islam who interpret Islam a particular way. But what I always find to be interesting is that relative to the central tenets of any religion, the sexual orientation conversation is very marginal. It's like one story of Lot, or you know what I mean? It's not like the main thing at all.
Grab onto that.
Yeah, and that speaks to something, I think, of fear and anxiety, or something that's going on within individuals and how they feel internally about that, and then project it externally and use religion as a rationale and justification.
Something that's really impactful in America right now is the discourse of the political candidates. I was going to mention one, but actually it's probably quite a few. Thoughts about that? What's the impact of that on Islamophobia?
Oh, I mean, it's been tremendously. I mean, as bad as I thought it was, this political campaign has really just has ramped things up, and it's really bringing out the worst out of people. It's rooted in fear. People don't fear what they don't understand, and they're being bombarded with images that are very narrow representations, and they're being bombarded with hate, and they're being told that they're being given permission. That's the thing that's different right now, is that they're being told, and because we're hearing a lot, they're saying what I'm thinking. And what that is permission. Oh, I'm actually allowed to think and say that I hate Muslims now, even though you might never have met Muslims, and your only representation of it could be watching videos of ISIS or Al Qaeda, in your lifetime, and not recognizing that these people representationally are 0.0001% of the people.
Could the government do more? I mean, to sort of lessen the severity of this problem? Bully pulpit or legislation? I mean, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about media. I mean, so I think the government's role is about media, because our media has become very corporate owned and deregulated to a point that independent voices are not cutting through and reaching people in a way in which I think we could have more context. I mean, it's all about context. So if when people don't have an understanding that most Muslims are just like regular people walking around living their lives.
They're just people. They're just people.
Like we're talking about 1.7 billion people on the planet. Look, if Buddhist extremists can exist in Burma and Sri Lanka, and Hindu extremists can if you can turn those faiths into extremist violent ideologies, you can pretty much do that with anything. And I think, Reza Aslan always talks about like it's all about what you bring to religion, And so, there's some people out there that are angry, and that's what they bring to their religion, and I, for the life of me, could never relate or understand something like that. I have no idea how anybody could expect me to answer for that. And as an American, the things that are happening, they're happening to me too. We're Americans. So not only do we deal with the fact that these things happen to us like it happens to all Americans. I mean, my brother lived in Manhattan, and when 9/11 happened, we were worried for his safety. And we found out he was treating patients in a hospital, people who were injured on 9/11. So these things happen to us too, But then we also face the backlash that comes after that because of the misinformation.
Fearless forecast. Look into the future as far as you can, 10 or 20 years. Yeah. What do you see as happening for Middle Easterners in general in the United States, Arab Americans, that, good or bad? What do you see on the horizon out there?
I see a fork in the road. And, I think we, as a country, we have a very big choice to make, and I'm really concerned about the endorsement and the enabling and the alignment with people who are publicly advocating and preaching hate. And even if they try to walk it back a little bit to make it look like they're actually more, it is very dangerous to buy that and to believe that when the discourse is so deeply rooted in vilification and hatred. And if we let that happen, I'm concerned about the historical examples that we have in the past, including Germany. And I know that that's dangerous territory, but it's that scary to me. I feel like I'm looking at something like that. And so that's, to me, the worst case scenario. And the best case scenario is that we find a way to be Americans and that we start to understand that this country needs to be for everybody and a space for everybody, that we honor our indigenous people, that we respect our immigrants, that we recognize that we need all of us to do this well in this country, and the demonization of any of us really damages us in the world landscape.
Dr. Amer Ahmed, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Cristobal Salinas, thank you for being here on Current Conversations. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
The numbers of Latino students at every level in education in America being admitted to colleges in record numbers, but they're not graduating. They're dropping out. Would it help to have more Latino teachers and faculty? I mean, could that make a difference in this picture?
So great question, right? So I think of the work that I do, my research, and I study the socialization of Latino male faculty in academia. And one of the few of the arguments that I make, but also supported by the literature, it talks about how having someone that looks like you, that sounds like you, that have similar social identities, and that you're able to relate with that individual, you're more likely to be successful. I also have I have the argument, and based on literature review as well, that the most powerful role model that anyone can have is an educator, because the student is with that individual, right? Now, when we speak about faculty at the university levels, a different type of thinking, limited hours, but if the impact still the same as if the educator wasn't, the student and the educator were in the K-12 system. So when we translate that to higher education, meeting with our faculty, it's still the same impact because faculty are making an impact on students. So it is important to continue to have Latino, Latinas in higher education as faculty. Now, we need to look at the trends of our data, our numbers, and I'm going to go a little bit back because that's the numbers that I have. First, in the cohort of 2011 and 12, out of all the earned PhDs in the United States, there were 5,000 Latinas and about 4,000 Latinos. And then I break that down by field. And in the field of education, there was only 423, I believe, Latinas and 220 Latinos that earned a PhD in education in 1 year. That's very problematic because that's less than 1% out of all the PhDs that were given in the United States. So when we translate that into what does it look like in the classroom, that doesn't mean that everyone that earns a PhD or a EDD or doctorate degree are going back into the classroom. Many of them are going to be practitioners as they didn't have a positive experience in their doctorate degree. So they go and do other things, policy or be a practitioner within the field.
You make the really compelling case, sort of with an exclamation point. Yes, there need to be more Latino teachers and professors. Why aren't there? I mean, if it's just self-evident, make that change, we're going to get results that we like better. I've even noticed in some Hispanic serving institutions where there are a lot of Latino students, 60 and 80%, often there aren't that many Latino teachers and professors.
So, I mean, there's a lot of it's a long discussion, a long conversation that we could have, but one of the things that I think about, or what I have discovered in my research is that, well, I haven't discovered, I think it's been out there, right? But what I learned through that process, but also understanding my own experiences. We are rejected, and we have been rejected, but we continue to be rejected by higher education, right? And I make the argument, for example, if we really want to make a change in our communities, we need to start publishing it in Spanish or in other languages in order to meet the needs of these communities. But so I go back to the idea of our Latinos or Latinas, right? In higher education, why are they not continuing in the graduate pathway? It is because often literature tells us and research tells us that it is because oftentimes they do not have the support, they do not know the system, how to navigate that. The other thing is financial aid, comes out a lot in the literature review. I think men and females have different experiences throughout this process, but also oftentimes familia plays a significant role.
Let me go back for a second and make sure I understand you correctly. You say we're being rejected. Go ahead. Is it because people aren't finishing PhD programs? Or is it because they are finishing, they're not getting hired? Or is it because they're getting hired, they're not being retained?
So we can look at it from different perspectives, right? Okay. Historically, we've been rejected by higher education because as we think about higher education, it was created for the white, right, and white males. Right. So since then, we've been rejected, but we look at cases that have happened historically, we've been rejected even before the different cases that have happened even before the civil rights movement, right? When we think of in California, Texas, when the Mexican community or the Chicano community were not allowed to be in the classroom with their white peers, right? Mm. So we've been rejected even before then.
When a Latino academic gets hired, somebody with a PhD, do schools do a good enough job of retaining them? I mean, you think, okay, finally we've got somebody inside and this person can do a lot of good. And you gave some wonderful evidence earlier that the impact on students can be huge. A professor to identify with, possibly teaching ethnic studies classes, or at least that dimension may come into their classes. Do universities do a credible job of retaining Latino faculty once they're there?
Well, literature tell us no. The literature review, but I can speak on that, and I can also speak on my experience, my limited experience as a faculty. I think for me, it's been more of finding. So let me go a little bit back. I think when we understand the experience of Latina faculty, they face many challenges, right? And that is understanding and negotiating the culture of the department, the college, but also the university. As oftentimes,
it can be very complicated.
Correct, yeah. And they're oftentimes they're required to do research, teaching, and service, but they're always invited to do everything in service because they are more likely to be the only Latino or faculty of color, oftentimes.
So let me just make sure, because some people won't know this area as well as you do. So somebody, a young Latino professor like you could be invited, or maybe even some ways pushed, to be on 10, 20 service communities for the university, but you've also got your day job. You need to teach your students and grade papers and do research, and the job could just expand out beyond what's doable.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we need to also look at, how universities are tokenizing our faculty, faculty of color, Latino, Latina. Basically. Yes, yeah, so they're on the front page for diversity. Here you are, and because I'm of color or Latino, I'm invited to be in a lot of diversity committees, not only in my university, but also across the country, right? Or do presentations, which that's my expertise because I happen to study that. But also oftentimes we see faculty that they don't even study that, but they do that. I think that if academia refuses to change, we will slowly change academia. And that is through our research, teaching, and service that we're doing. But it is hard. Now, if universities are going to retain us, I think that's a lot of work to do. We are seeing that a lot of universities are hiring chief diversity officers. Yeah, the diversity officers. Yeah. But I think the question comes from the faculty perspective, from teachers, why doesn't this comes from the provost office, from the president's office, right? So we criticize that as well. Why are universities hiring these diversity officers? right? I understand that it's so important, they're important, but also why are not the presidents or the provost taking the initiative to start the conversation?
No, in other words, in the bureaucracy of higher education, the prestige of the position you have, if it has the support of the president, the provost, that's one thing. If it's lower down in the hierarchy, that signals to students and everybody that it's not quite as important. Is that the kind of thing you're getting at?
Well, that's one of the points or arguments, but I think in this sense, I'm criticizing more hierarchy, question the status quo, that if we really want to make change, everyone has to be part of this.
It seems to me that ultimately what we're talking about here is social justice, to bring more Latino students, students of color in general, into higher education, into the culture itself. What role do you think organizations like the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, the conference we're at right now as we talk, where educators come from all over the world, really, but certainly the United States, talk about these kind of issues. What role do you think these organizations can play in the kind of effort you're talking about?
Well, I see NCORE, and organizations like NCORE played a significant role in that work that we're trying to do back in our campuses, as they provide with the best practices or promising practices, and also research that oftentimes we don't have access to, right? Because we might not be the experts on the field. But I think it starts the conversation where oftentimes we're afraid to start the conversation back
Which is the motto of NCORE,
start the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that we're doing that. And I don't think we're gonna change, we're gonna be so inclusive within the next 10, 15 years. It's going to be a long process, right? Because once we cover one issue, we have another issue, or I don't want to call it issue or challenge, it's a reality, because those are realities that we face every day, the realities of our community. But I think creating awareness, and that's what we're doing, but also providing the space to start this conversation, because when we go back home, oftentimes we do not have the space to speak about our experiences of oppression, racism, microaggressions, or even privilege that we often have as faculty or educators.
Dr. Criss Salinas, thank you very much for being on Current Conversations today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.